All right, let's kick off this deep dive and really get into unlimited power. This classic self-help book. See what we can find. I think it's really interesting that you've handed this to us because you seem so ready to like take control
Mm.
and reach your full potential, and that's really what unlimited power is all about, right?
It really is, yeah. The book's just packed with all these techniques and strategies for success, but it's all about, like understanding and then harnessing that power that's already within you.
Yeah, and right away, Robbins kind of like challenges us to think differently about what power even is, you know?
Oh, absolutely. He makes the point that, real power isn't about like controlling other people, but about like mastering yourself,
Right.
and realizing that you have all this power to choose what you think, how you feel, and like even how you act. And those choices are what ultimately shape your reality.
So like it's more about like taking responsibility for your own life and not letting things outside of you dictate your outcomes.
Exactly. Yeah, Robbins is all about that personal responsibility, and taking control of your own destiny. And one of the ways he says you can do that is through this concept of modeling.
Oh yeah, that's where we get into some of those like really cool examples, right? Like he talks about how Steven Spielberg, when he was just a teenager, like snuck onto the Universal Studios lot just to learn about filmmaking.
Right. He was so determined to break into the industry that he just like took action.
He just like immersed himself in it.
Yeah, and that's such a great example of what Robbins is talking about with this whole modeling thing. It's not about, just copying someone else blindly, but it's about like understanding how successful people think and act, those patterns of success, and then adapting those to your own life, your own goals and circumstances.
Yeah, it's like reverse engineering success, figure out what works and then apply those principles to yourself. One of the things I thought was so fascinating was his concept of state. He argues that like our emotional and physical conditions, our state, really drives our actions and determines our outcomes.
Oh, that's a huge one. It's like a core principle of the book. Think about it, like how differently do you act when you're feeling super confident and energized as opposed to when you're feeling all stressed out and
Or it's
exhausted?
night and day. When I'm feeling good, I'm like way more likely to get stuff done and tackle challenges head on.
Exactly. And Robbins argues that we have so much more control over our state than we even realize, and he gives all these techniques for changing your state like on purpose by changing, like your posture or your breathing or even just your facial expressions.
Wait, so you're telling me that like if I just like stand up straight and smile, I could actually start feeling more confident?
That's exactly what he's saying. Yeah, he argues that, our physiology and our emotions are like super interconnected.
Whoa, that's kind of mind-blowing. It's like having a secret weapon for success. Being able to control your emotional state, to me, that feels like real power.
It is. And once you understand how important that is, Robbins introduces this thing he called the ultimate success formula. And it's this four-step process for achieving any goal.
Okay, break it down for me. What are the 4 steps?
So the first step is you got to define what you want, like what's your outcome?
So step 1 is all about setting that clear target. What's next?
All right, so step 2 is, take massive action toward that target. No more procrastinating.
Got it. Action is key. What about step 3?
Step 3 is all about noticing, what's working, what's not working. You got to pay attention to the results of your actions and be honest with yourself.
So it's like constantly evaluating your progress and being willing to, switch things up if you need to.
Exactly. And then finally, step 4 is, be flexible and change your approach until you actually get that desired outcome. Don't give up too easily. Keep experimenting until you find what works for you.
I love how practical this formula is. It's a framework that can be applied to like anything you want to achieve in life.
Oh, absolutely. It takes the mystery out of success and gives you like a roadmap for getting from where you are to where you want to be. But achieving success isn't just about having a plan. It's also about identifying those limiting beliefs that are holding us back.
And Robbins dives into that, right? He calls them the 7 lies of success.
He does. He challenges the idea that we need to know everything in order to succeed. He says, we should be focused on modeling excellence, finding those key actions that really produce results and mastering those.
That's such a relief because I always feel like I need to have all the answers before I can start anything new.
It's a common feeling, but Robbins says it's a limiting belief. He also debunks the belief that you have to be perfect to be successful. In fact, he actually encourages us to like embrace failure, as part of the learning process.
That's huge. It's like giving yourself permission to experiment and make mistakes and learn along the way.
Exactly. And he also challenges to believe that there's only one right way to do things. Instead, he says, you got to find what works best for you and be willing to adapt your approach as you go.
Now, this next part of the book gets really interesting. Robbins introduces this concept of submodalities, which sounds kind of intimidating, but it's actually pretty fascinating.
It is, yeah. Some modalities are basically like the subtle ways that we represent experiences in our minds. They're like the building blocks of our thoughts and feelings.
Can you give us like a concrete example of that?
Sure, imagine like a food that you really dislike. Now picture it in your mind. You can actually change how you feel about that food just by adjusting how you're visualizing it. If you make it smaller or dimmer or further away in your mind's eye, it suddenly doesn't seem so repulsive anymore.
So you're saying I can literally change how I feel about things by changing how I picture them in my mind.
That's the idea. Yeah, Robbins suggests that we have way more control over our emotional responses than we think.
It's like reprogramming your brain for success.
Exactly. And that leads us to this final part we'll talk about today where Robbins talks about fueling your excellence. He really emphasizes the importance of, maximizing your physical energy for peak performance.
This is where we get into the nitty-gritty of taking care of our physical selves, right?
Right. He really stresses the importance of breathing and food combining for optimal health and vitality.
Wait, food combining, what's that all about?
Oh, Robbins goes deep into the science of how different food combinations can affect, your digestion, your energy levels, and just your overall well-being.
That sounds like a whole other deep dive.
It is, but the main point here is that Robbins is really emphasizing that, how we feel physically directly impacts our mental and emotional states. You can't expect to perform at your best if you're not taking care of your body.
So we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our exploration of unlimited power. We've talked about, defining true power and mastering our state and debunking those limiting beliefs. And we even started to explore, like, the incredible power of our minds.
Yeah, and we've seen how Robbins encourages us to really take ownership of our lives and create our own success. Yeah, it's really about, like, recognizing that we have way more control over our lives than we often think.
Right. And that's so empowering.
It is, yeah. It's like Robbins is giving us this set of tools to really take charge and shape our destinies.
Speaking of tools, he also talks about this thing he calls the syntax of success, which sounds kind of technical.
It does, but it's actually really fascinating. Think of it like this syntax is kind of like the order of operations, like the specific sequence of steps that lead to a result. Robbins believes that success in any area of life follows like a specific formula or structure.
So if we can understand that underlying structure, we can replicate it in our own lives.
That's the idea. And remember how we were talking about Steven Spielberg sneaking onto that universal lot? That was just one step in his journey, but the order in which he did things was really important.
Right. First, he defined his outcome. He wanted to be a director. Then he took action. He stuck onto the lot. He observed everything. He even started making his own short films. Next, he noticed what was working. He got positive feedback and realized he was good at it. And then finally, he adapted his approach. He made a more polished film, showed it to Universal execs, and that landed him his first directing contract.
Exactly. That sequence, defining his outcome, taking action, noticing what worked, and adapting his approach, that was essential to his success. And Robbins says the same basic structure can be applied to achieving any goal.
That's really helpful. So how do we figure out this syntax? Is it just trial and error, or is there a more systematic way you approach it?
Well, Robbins actually provides this technique for uncovering those patterns of success. He calls it eliciting strategies.
Okay, I gotta admit, that sounds a little mysterious. What does it mean to elicit strategies?
Basically, it's a process for figuring out, the unconscious thought patterns and behaviors that drive a person's actions in a certain area.
So it's like detective works for the mind. You're trying to figure out the code that makes someone successful.
Precisely, Robbins gives specific techniques for doing this, using carefully crafted questions and observations to reveal the underlying structure of someone's strategy.
Can you give us an example of how that works in practice? I'm having a hard time picturing it.
Sure. Let's say you want to understand how someone makes decisions. You could ask them to think about a recent decision they made, and then just watch their eye movements. Robbins teaches that our eyes actually move in specific directions, depending on whether we're accessing visual memories or creating images or recalling sounds or feeling emotions.
Whoa, that's so interesting. Our eyes are giving away clues about how we think.
Exactly. By paying attention to those little cues, you can start to piece together the sequence of internal representations that led to their decision.
So if I'm understanding this right, once you understand the syntax of someone's decision-making strategy, you can start to model it yourself.
Exactly. And that's the power of this technique. You can use it to understand how someone gets motivated or how they overcome challenges, how they connect with people, or even how they fall in love. It's about seeing those patterns that lead to success and then adapting them for your own goals.
Now, one thing that keeps coming up in unlimited power is this idea of our physiology, our posture, our breathing, our movements. How does that tie into everything else we've been talking about?
Oh, it's a huge piece of the puzzle. Robbins argues that our physiology isn't just a reflection of our state. It's actually a powerful tool for changing it.
That makes sense. I know when I'm feeling down, I tend to slouch, and my energy just goes way down.
Right. But the amazing thing is that we can use our physiology to shift our state in a more positive direction.
So, like, if you're feeling all slumped over and tired, you could, like, consciously change your posture, take a deep breath, put a smile on your face, and start feeling more confident and energized.
Exactly. It might sound super simple, but there's actually a lot of research that supports this mind-body connection.
That's pretty amazing. It means we have this, like, built-in mechanism for boosting our mood and motivation. It's not just about willpower. It's about understanding how to use our physiology to create the state we need to be successful.
And Robbins takes this even further with this technique he calls mirroring.
Mirroring, is that literally like looking in a mirror?
Not exactly. Mirroring is when you like subtly match the physiology of another person to build rapport and understanding.
Oh, okay. So if someone's sitting with their legs crossed and leaning forward, I should do the same thing?
Well, not necessarily exactly the same, but yeah, you want to adopt a similar posture and energy level. By mirroring their physiology, you're basically communicating to their unconscious mind that you're on the same wavelength.
So this is about building connection and trust through body language.
Exactly. It's a technique that's used by therapists, salespeople, negotiators, anyone who wants to build rapport and influence others.
I can see how that would be really useful in a lot of situations. So to recap this section, Robbins is encouraging us to pay attention to our physiology, both how it affects us and how we can use it to our advantage.
Exactly. It's about recognizing the power of that mind-body connection and using it to create the state we need to achieve our goals.
This is fascinating stuff, and we haven't even touched on some of Robbins's other insights into breathing and nutrition and the power of setting compelling goals.
There's so much in this book. It's all designed to help you unlock your full potential.
I'm starting to see why unlimited power has had such a big impact on so many people. It's not just about achieving success, it's about understanding how we behave as humans and mastering those tools we all have inside us to create the lives we want. It really is about, recognizing that we're not just passengers. We can actually shape our own reality.
That's right. And that's like the main message of the book. Robbins wants us to get rid of those limiting beliefs and those self-sabotaging behaviors that are holding us back. He wants us to like step into our power and create the lives we really want.
So to wrap things up, what are some of the key takeaways from unlimited power that people can start using in their lives like right now?
Well, I think the first and most important thing is, taking ownership of your life, realizing that you have the power to choose your thoughts, your emotions, your actions, and ultimately to shape your destiny.
It's such a simple idea, but when you really think about it, it's so powerful. It's about shifting from things happen to me to I make things happen.
Exactly. And that goes hand in hand with Robbins' idea of modeling. Find people who are already doing what you want to do at life and study how they do it. What actions are they taking? What do they believe? How do they manage their state and their energy?
It's like having a blueprint for success. Instead of starting from scratch, you can learn from the people who've already been there.
Right. Another really important takeaway is this idea of mastering your state. Become aware of how your physiology, your internal representations, and your language patterns are affecting your emotions. And then use those techniques Robbins gives you to shift your state into one that's more empowering and helps you succeed.
That's what we were talking about before with like posture and breathing. It's amazing how much control we actually have over our emotional state when we understand that mind-body connection.
It really is. And finally, don't underestimate the power of belief. Your beliefs shape your reality. If you believe you can do something, you're way more likely to take the actions you need to make it happen. But if you believe you're limited, you'll probably stay stuck.
It's like that Henry Ford quote, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
Exactly. So choose your beliefs wisely. Surround yourself with people who lift you up and challenge you to grow. And never stop learning and expanding your understanding of what's possible.
This has been an amazing deep dive. Unlimited Power has so much wisdom and practical advice, it's hard to cover it all at once.
It really does. But I think we've hit on some of the most important ideas and given people a good starting point for their own journey.
Absolutely. And remember, as Robin says, the meeting of preparation with opportunity generates the offspring we call luck.
So go out there and create your own luck. And remember, you have the power within you to create the life you want.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep unleashing your unlimited power.